Yo, still Bills, what's the deal, man? I'm heading to go pick up this little girl from school. You know, she starts college this summer. Y'all heard me talk about it before. I want to pick her up from school. I want to make sure I get there a little bit earlier, so I don't keep her out there waiting like I've done the past couple of days. But that's neither here nor there. So peep game. I want to get into something, man, and that's I know we, I want to do a video on Terry Harper versus Carolyn Dubois, and Ellie Scottney versus Mayeli, but I don't want to talk about those fights just yet, and I want to do just a little bit more study on Carolyn and Mayeli before I get my prediction, which it will be a prediction because they fight on Sunday, and it's Saturday and Sunday, and hold up, does Carolyn Dubois fight this weekend? I'm not sure if she fights this weekend. Now, if it ain't this weekend, it's like, it may be on the Callum Smith and David Morrell undercard. But we do get Mayeli Flores and Ellie Scottney fighting this weekend. So I want to do a little bit more film study on those two, on two of the four before I give my prediction. But peep game, I'm going to get into something. That is, I'm really excited about this fight. And I've been talking about it for maybe close to a year now. Yeah, I would say about a year. It's been about a year since I started talking about it, and I got a lot of flack from people when I said how I felt about this fight. And that's Callum Smith versus David Morrell, man. That's the fight that I'm really excited about. Of course, it's a lot of Americans who don't, they don't think the world of Callum Smith, you dig, and they always use that excuse. He got his ass beat by Canelo and he got his ass beat by Beterbiev, as if the majority of them cats who fought that they fought didn't. You dig? The only one to beat Bivol was Beterbiev, and the only one to beat Beterbiev was Bivol. Only three to beat Canelo was Bud, Floyd, and Bivol. And every fighter that I mentioned are generational talents, all five of them. You dig? So losing to them is not the end of the world. You can't, that shouldn't, how is that a knock against you because you lost to all-time great fighters? So, and I just, people just, people are real ridiculous, but people don't really think too much of Callum Smith. I have my man KO Boxing, shout out KO Boxing, I fucks with it, and I told him before, I'm like, man, I don't agree with nothing you got to say about David Benavidez and Gervonta Davis, but homeboy know his shit. I fucks with KO, that's the homie right there, straight up and down, that's the homie. But I do remember him saying, yo, man, every fight for David Benavidez, not named Bivol and Beterbiev at 175 is a tune-up. I was just like, dang, this how lowly they think of the likes of Callum Smith, man. And of course, it ain't just Callum Smith. It's every other fighter in that division. But Callum Smith's name is mentioned more so than anybody else's name, not named Bivol or Beterbiev at light heavyweight. So people just have this, they just have this paradigm towards Callum Smith that he's just, he's a bred, a Euro bum, he trash and blah, 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 blah. And they'll ignore the fact that he was the Ring Magazine champion. He was the lineal champion before Canelo moved up and demoted him off his spot. That, of course, goes under the rug, but whatever the fuck ever, man. But it's a dope matchup between these two because it'll be a common opponent between the two of them. I'm excited about this fight, man, and both of them in their last performances, I like that type of fight in front of Callum, with Callum Smith and Joshua Buatsi was to be expected. Why? Because Joshua Buatsi is a top 10 opponent in the division. It was, he's a legitimate bona fide top fighter in the division, a legitimate contender. So that was to be expected. That was to be expected for him with that fight. David Morrell, since he's moved up to light heavyweight, has not had a stellar performance. He's nicked a couple of, he nicked the win with Radovaya Kalajic. He lost to David Benavidez, which was to be expected, which I said that he would lose to David Benavidez due to experience. And after he got that experience, he went and he had another tough fight. Salute to him on a tough fight with Imam Katayev. And the general consensus is David Morrell lost that fight. He has not looked stellar as a light heavyweight thus far. He has not looked stellar. So, I heard somebody say they both had tough fights. The fight with Callum Smith was it was supposed to be tough. It was supposed to be tough. Why? Because Joshua Buatsi has been in there with not the cream of the crop in that division, but enough top contenders to warrant that type of resistance that he, justify the resistance that he gave Callum Smith. and that was resistance. But nonetheless, I think Callum Smith won. I think he won pretty comfortably. I think he won pretty comfortably. I think I can't think of a reason why anybody would give Joshua Buatsi that dub. I can't do it. I thought it was a clear and concise victory. But nonetheless, he was supposed to give him that type of resistance, and that was a damn good fight, a potential fight of the year. So it's justified as to why Callum Smith looked the way that he did in front of Joshua Buatsi. That's just what it is, man. But like I said, and if you listen to IBFP, shout out Nuke in the panel. If you listen to any of his lives, you've heard me say Callum Smith is gonna fuck David Morrell up. You've heard me say that a multitude of times. Now, granted, I will say this: him adding Ismail Salas to his camp and the experience that he just gained fighting Imam Katayev after fighting David Benavidez, that's a step in the right direction for him, man. That is gonna add to the experience that he already has, and that could potentially get him over the line in a fight like this. It could. You just, when you face a certain level of resistance, man, that only ups your IQ, that ups your skill set, that ups everything about you. It ups everything about you. So this isn't gonna be the same. This isn't the same David Morrell. Oh no, this isn't the same David Morrell that fought Akbeka. This isn't the same David Morrell that fought. I can't remember I think the dude was a Kazakh. This isn't the same David Morrell that that put dude in the coma. That it's not that same David Morrell. This is a upgraded version of David Morrell, a more seasoned version of David Morrell. But we can't ignore the fact that every time this dude, just when he's faced some sort of level of resistance, he's looked suspect, man. Radavalle Kalajic, right? For him to be able to keep him off balance in the way that he did and counter him effectively, and just put enough offense out there for David Morrell to kind of just go grain neutral, and that's my biggest issue with him. He just goes grain neutral. For him to be able to do that, and Kalajic isn't necessarily a premier light heavyweight, and for him to make you look like that, you can, okay, cool, that was his premier fight in the division. I bet that, word, whatever the fuck ever, man. But when it starts to become a repetitive behavior, it becomes problematic, man. And just Kalajic, you wasn't supposed to go in there and look the way that you looked against Kalajic, but we can give you grace on that because you got to get acclimated to the division. I give you grace on losing to David Benavidez because you hadn't even fought a champion, a former champion before, man. And so I give you grace on that. I give you grace on that. Just whatever the fuck ever with that. That's neither here nor there with me. But when you go in there and you look the way that you look in front of a Katayev, and people want to run to the notion that you was, he was juiced to the gills, but the thing was, he was juiced in the last fight. He popped 30 in his last fight. Not this fight. Not this fight. He didn't, man. And even when you are juiced to the gills, when you have a certain skill set, you're supposed to find ways to overcome that. Josh Taylor found a way to overcome that. Why couldn't you do the same thing? I don't get it, man. But nonetheless, you went in there with someone, I don't believe he was juiced that night. If he was, damn. But even if he was, you should have still found a way around that shit. Because that's what talented people who are more talented than other fighters do, and you wasn't able to do it. But as I'm watching this fight play out, man, and I don't see how anybody can give David Morrell that fight, man. I don't. I've watched it about 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, I cannot understand how he got the nod in this fight. And all right, so we're gonna take it to this direct. We're gonna take it this route. David Morrell, because he's a southpaw, he's gonna lead with his, right hand. He's gonna lead with his right hand. The jab, it's a lot easier to counter the jab out of the conventional stand. It's easier for both. It's easier for both. I've had a lot of success fighting southpaws or sparring southpaws, and I'm able to, land the hook a lot more, at a lot higher rate than I am against a conventional fighter because of that, because of the dynamic and how, the lead hands match up against each other. I'm able to, counter the jab a little bit better. with, you know, in front of southpaws. I've seen that. I've noticed that. And when you look at a dude like Callum Smith and you look at a dude like David Morrell, let's take David Morrell. You know, he has his moments where he's grain neutral, but he also has his moments where he's letting go of shots. He's letting go of shots, and when he's letting go of them shots, when he's letting go of them shots, those hooks and those jabs, you know, from the, out of the lead hand. What's Callum Smith's counter, his money punch? The catch and shoot counter left hook. The catch and shoot counter left hook, man. That punch is going to be there all night. It's there when he's in front of a conventional fighter. And you take into consideration about how often this dude got clipped in front of Imam Katayev. I'm having a very difficult time seeing how Callum Smith is not going to be able to land that shot with regularity. David Morrell is not punching like he was at 168 pounds. We don't even know how good he was as a super middleweight. He came into prominence on the PBC side, and y'all just ran with the fact that he's a standout name in the division. And when y'all never gave a fuck about testing him outside of David Benavidez. He didn't really care about being tested. And neither did y'all. And because he was, he's a fighter on the PBC and he fought the level of opposition that he fought and he beat them in the brutal fashion that he beat them in, that was enough to say that he's the best in the division without having to prove it, man. So we don't even know how, what his power was like as a super middleweight. Now we jump up to light heavyweight and he hasn't even down nothing up there like heavyweight. He didn't down Katayev. He couldn't find fucking, Kalajic to down him. Callum Smith in his debut, and people brush this under the rug as if it's just a whatever the fuck ever type thing. Callum Smith gave Lyndon Castillo a seizure in his debut fight as a light heavyweight in 2 rounds. That was a violent knockout to the point they had to pan the cameras away from the fucking ring. That was a violent knockout. That goes under the rug because of who was a Lyndon Castillo, whatever the fuck, all that goofy shit or whatever, man. So, like, I'm having a hard time dealing with trying to come up to the conclusion that David Morrell has a chance. Not a chance, of course he has a chance, but he's gonna, how people are just comfortable in thinking that he's gonna win the fight because they don't think much of Callum Smith. David Morrell, I think, has the faster feet than Callum Smith. I think he could, use that southpaw advantage and cut those angles and spin them to his lead hand or spin to his lead hand. But even when you do that, you're still setting yourself up to get walked into a left hook. That dude's left hook is devious. And I don't think David Morrell, I think it's going to take him a while. Somebody did a breakdown, and I thought the breakdown that this individual did, it was logical, man. The first 1 to 4 rounds is going to be not necessarily fill-out rounds, but I do think it's going to take a minute for Callum Smith to get used to David Morrell's movement. He's a good counter-puncher. He's a good counter puncher. He has good, a good 1-2, but even when he gets to throwing his hooks, we saw with David Benavidez, it's a lot of slapping on those hooks, and he's not fully turning the shots over and getting full extension on them. It's a lot of slapping, and it's a lot of smothering on the shots. He's still unpolished in moments, man. But he did look a little bit better in the Katayev fight. He looked a little bit better in the Katayev fight. So. But it's gonna take him a few rounds to figure out that puzzle. But I feel like once he does, it's just gonna get ugly for David Morrell, bro. It's gonna get ugly. Maybe Ismail Salas can teach him how to how to be a lot more judicious and sharp with that, with the jabs and with the left hooks, mainly the jab, because that's the punch that I see him consistently get countered with over the top. Maybe he can do, work that benefit for him. But even then, how much can you work for that? How much you got? What you fought him in July. Can you have that much of an upgrade in these amount of months? I'm not so sure. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But I just don't. If we get the same version of David Morrell that we got in front of Katayev and in front of Kalajic and in front of David Benavidez, I got Callum Smith fucking this nigga up, bro. I do. I got Callum Smith fucking this nigga up. I got Callum Smith fucking this nigga up, man. Just, I look at Callum Smith. I look at the dude, he's not faster on his feet than a David Morrell, but because his limbs are so much longer than most of the cats in the division, he's able to stay on top of you wherever it is you're going. If he got to go on the hunt, he's able to cut you off on, wherever it is you're going. He's able to get in and get out at a much faster and a much faster rate than the average light heavyweight, because he's so much rangier than them. David Morrell is he's gonna tap dance. And can he afford to tap dance with Callum Smith on the outside? No. His limbs aren't as long. And if he does decide he wants to tap dance, and you're gonna have to keep him honest with the jabs. And the minute that jab gets caught on his lead glove, that left hook is coming. David Morrell hasn't looked impressive as a light heavyweight. He hasn't. Y'all rushed him, and it could change come, what's that, next week? It could change come next week. Or is it the week after? No, it's next week. That could change. That could change. But will it? I'm not so sure. I can say what y'all want to say, man, but Callum Smith is seasoned, and that's the biggest. David Morrell is seasoned. Yes, he's seasoned. He has a champion, a current world champion on his resume right now. Yeah, he does. Callum Smith is a former world champion. Callum Smith has also beaten contenders he's beaten the better contenders I won't say the better. The jury is out on David Benavidez versus Joshua Buatsi if they were ever to fight. But I just think Callum Smith has been in with the better opposition. So while David Morrell has been in with Benavidez, Callum Smith has been in with Beterbiev and Canelo, and now Joshua Buatsi. I'm going with Callum Smith in this fight. I don't know if it's going to be a knockout, but I do see Callum Smith, making homeboy touch earth. I do see it. Because you're not about to convince me you just going to stay out of the way of that counter, catch and shoot left hook. You're not going to convince me that you're going to stay out of the way of the uppercut that this dude throws. He throws a hellacious uppercut, and he taps the body well. I seen, he was tripling up on the left hand in front of Joshua Buatsi. Hook, uppercut, hook. Upstairs, downstairs, man. Like, that's a real complex combination right there. What reason do y'all have to believe that David Morrell is going to beat Callum Smith, other than the fact that he lost to David Benavidez? And he's one of the better wins for David Benavidez. And he's not a PBC fighter. Or he was a PBC fighter. It's real ridiculousness. Could we be wrong? Could I be wrong? Yeah, I'm human. I'm not Nostradamus in this bitch. But just if we get the same version of David Morrell that we got in these past few fights, Callum Smith is going to crash that nigga. And that's just how I'm feeling about it, man. So y'all let me know how the fuck y'all feel about it, and if I'm burnt out or if I'm on to something. I will holler at y'all after I do these film studies on these ladies, and I'll get up with y'all soon. Deuces.